All right, good morning. So, one of our subscribers had asked us to do a review of Symbaroum, and I've kind of talked about it with my cheat sheet video, and I've talked about it in other videos, but I thought I would go ahead and do a comprehensive review or look at Symbaroum. Okay, let me start by saying I don't read rule books, I interpret rule books, which means I go through them more than once, and I break them down. So this is how I learn rules. This is how um, it's part of what I'm about when it comes to respecting a rule book as designed, designer intent, even if it's unintentional. Hopefully, good game designers write the rule book so the intent of the game is achieved, and hopefully, game designers write something deliberate so you actually do the thing the way they want you to do it. Symbaroum is first and foremost very consistent. Number one. Number two, it is translated from, I believe, Sweden, right? So this is a Swedish game that has been translated. So there's going to be some, in my opinion, minor translation issues. I think they've been blown somewhat out of proportion, but for the most part, uh, if you've read the book and you've interpreted the rules, you can recognize where the translation is maybe off a little bit, but very consistent, including the art, the themes, the system is consistent with what it wants the game to be. So first, Symbaroum, like I think many great games, starts first, I think, with giving you a phenomenal world introduction. Some games start you off immediately with character generation, but I think many really good modern games start you off with the world. They give you the flavor. They of course start you off with the dice you're going to need and what a role playing game is. But then we go right into the world of Symbaroum. It's not important that the players know this completely, but it is important they understand the nature of the game you're about to partake in. It is important to understand that there are numerous races and that these races have a background, etc., etc. So it does a brilliant job of really narrowing the focus of the core rulebook to this basically this town right on the border of the Davakar, where you're going to be doing 90% of your gaming based on the core book. However, there's the whole region here of cities and things that are human. So you could spend some time in Yundarus, you could spend your time traveling around here, Indaros, and then of course Thistlehold is where most of the adventures launch into the Davokar. So pretty simple. They're very clear. The game is purposely focused here, so the edges are free for you to interpret for other adventures. So I like the fact that they drill into some serious detail, but then they leave a lot of things completely open for you to interpret or to add your own flavor to as you move on. They have the factions. I've talked about this before. The factions, the races, the cultural is all covered in the introduction. Right. Thistlehold. They talk about the entire city of Thistlehold, what's going on there. Our characters started in what's called Thistlescold, Blackmore, which is just outside of Thistlehold, and it's a tent city. So I did not start them in Thistlehold. Okay, so that's kind of, I think, traditional of mini games now. They really get you in with the lore in the city. This can be overwhelming for people who just want to jump right in, make a character, and play. They don't want, a lot of players do not want to have to know this canon and this intellectual property before they start. However, I think if you're playing with players who respect what you're going to do, the hobby, etc., especially a campaign, they'll invest themselves and they'll have their character prepared. They'll invest themselves in the world. If you're doing a one-off, it's the GM's job to facilitate where they're at and roughly what's going on, and then go play. But if I was playing a chronicle or a campaign with people, I would expect them to read this and make some effort to understand where their character comes from, what's going on in the world. I think that's not a lot to ask for serious hobbyists who invest in a campaign. The rest of the book, for the most part, then consists of the player's guide and the GM's guide. So basically, your player's guide and your GM's book are in this core book. You don't have to buy a GM's guide separately, right? Okay. Player's guide goes through character creation, introduction to the races, again the classes, and then again we get into character creation, and I will talk all about that right now. So I'll pull up this card for us. So, Symbaroum Deep Dive, world setting consistency, and I believe those things, it is remarkably consistent from top to bottom in every way. Character generation is point by array. You get to choose a point array and drop them into your attributes, or you can spend 80 points to purchase attributes, abilities, etc. The game consists of, your character consists of 8 attributes, and this is important because the game uses this and only these attributes to conduct all dice rolls. So there's not any reference to any other obscure rules in which you use other dice to do a thing, right? You will roll everything you ever roll as a player in this game will be an attribute modified by a value modifier, okay? The value modifier will be a difficulty set by the GM, or it'll be an opponent's attribute modifier, okay, when you're in a combat, for instance. So all players need to know the simple basic rule is you will always roll an attribute and you need to roll d20 and under, equal or under, to be successful. It's that simple. Races, there are 4. Human, changeling, goblin, and ogre. However, there are 2 cultures of human, Ambrian and barbarian. There are 3 archetypes, which are guides, not limits. So you do not have to create one of these 3 things. They can really vary based on how you build your character, which I really appreciate. They're not really classes. There are 9 traits. They are all tied to racial, your race selection. And then there are 36 abilities. These are, think of these as feats in Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons. They're actually, they allow you to, again, round your character out to have certain abilities, stepping to further drill into your character's uniqueness, right? Attributes are one way. Obviously, race is one way with the traits that come with those races. But the abilities is where you start to drill into the uniqueness of your character. Abilities can be active, passive, free, reaction abilities, or special abilities, right? So they can come into play in any of these phases as an active thing, a passive thing, a free action thing, a reaction thing, or a special ability thing. There are 3 levels of all abilities: novice, adept, and master. So think of these as proficiencies in a way, right? They're more abilities are more complicated generally, not in the sense that they're math kicks. For instance, novice won't be like +2, adept +4, master +6. It's not that kind of thing. Novice will let you do something as a free action. Adept might then say you get to do it as a free action with a bonus or something. So you really need to read what novice means to your ability or adept to your ability. It does change the level and the quality of this ability. Okay. And then again, they are archetype suggestions to guide you. So if you want to make a rogue, they'll have things that are good rogue. They'll have recommendations for a rogue, a warrior, and a wizard. So think about archetypes as guides, and then the abilities will kind of help you build a wizard, or, a warrior, etc. However, you could have a wizard that wields armor and weapons. It's a pretty sweet game. There are mystical traditions. This is magic, and there are 5. There's the church, there is sorcery, there is witchcraft, there is wizardry, and then there is independent. Independent are dangerous. These guys are considered, in a way, anathema, or apostates. They will ultimately be hunted by black coats. The rest belong to a discipline or a school. So you go, you're either in the church and you learn through the church, or you are a sorcerer and you learn through the schools, or you're a witch and you learn from other witches, or you're a wizard and you learn through apprenticeship. they're all tied to some discipline. And then there's independent, those who learn purely by chance or by uh, self-taught. Okay, these are system-specific effects, powers, rituals, and corruption. So these are system-specific, meaning they'll either create a power or they are a power like spell. They're a ritual, which requires time. And then there's corruption, always associated with anything you do in magic, whether they're magic items or magic abilities, you will face corruption. So this is how it balances out the use of these supernatural powers. You will deal with corruption. There are 25 mystical powers at 3 levels. Again, think of mystical powers as spells, like abilities, and they are a novice, adept, and master, like abilities. Okay. And then there are 34 rituals, which are tradition specific, and they require time and generally a tradition. So it'll be a witchcraft, something you've learned via witchcraft, and it requires a ritual to activate the thing. So these take time. These are more like spells that have a corruption level, and etc., etc. And mystical powers usually require a thing like a trinket or something to do. Okay. That's pretty much everything related directly to your character. Okay, so your character, every role will involve an attribute. There are 4 races in the game that players can play. Archetypes are guides, not limits. Traits are based on your race. Traits are just things like long-lived, short-lived, etc. Then there are 36 abilities, which are like skills. I would say they're more like skills than anything else, and they all have levels. And they can be used in a particular way, right? And then, of course, there's magic. Okay, magic are 25 spells, and then there are 34 rituals, and that is your character and everything that pertains to your character and his class, his abilities. System conceits. Symbaroum is player facing, which means the players roll everything. GM never rolls a die in this. Matter of fact, even in the expedition rules, uh, uh, and excavation rules, it's implied the players will roll the dice for everything. So this is one of the reasons it's difficult to play this in a random hex crawl way, because the GM can't roll secretly and kind of know in advance what's coming. Okay. It is a d20 roll under attribute system. Character attribute is modified by value modifier, and the value modifier would be another attribute modifier or a difficulty modifier. Right. So if we're making an we're making a opposed strength check, it would be the character's strength attribute of 10 modified by the monster's strength attribute modifier. That is subtracted or added to the character's attribute, and you roll under that number. Okay, so that's what an opposed strength check would look like. Gameplay is in a rhythm, in my opinion, or it's in again, this is part of the conceits. There are interludes, which is basically no dice, and it's going to be narrative, narrating the trip, narrating the opening scene, allowing the players to narrate during breaks what their character's doing in the city of Thistlefold. There's going to be no dice at all in in an interlude. And there's no reason an interlude can't involve the players telling us what they're doing in the meantime. Scenes could be activated by GM or player. Scenes can be something like I'm bartering with the goblin to acquire the map, and then maybe dice rolls required. And then turns are combat. Anything in the rules that refers to turns is limited to combat. All right. So a fine example is the curse ability that Dell had the other night. It's a combat option, so he can't use it to just curse in general. It's all combat only. And then the big shadow, a big system conceit is shadow and corruption. Everything in the world that's living has a shadow, and that shadow will depict its level of corruption. And then corruption eventually will overwhelm characters or creatures, and they will become abominations. And in that sense, you will lose control of your character if you ever get that corrupted. There are ways to mitigate corruption, so it's not always a foregone conclusion. And but for the most part, if you play long enough, your characters will have some corruption. Advantage in Symbaroum is very simple. If there's any advantage at all, it's a simple +2, and you do not stack it, so you can't get multiple advantages. You either have advantage or you don't, right? There's never a reference to disadvantage. So I want to make this clear. There is advantage, but never is there a reference to a disadvantage. So characters can either be in an advantageous position and get a +2 to their attribute, or it's normal. That's it. Okay. Money matters. This is important to me. Hopefully you guys can read this, but money matters. So you need money for everything, which means it gives you a reason to explore, gives you a reason to get a job, gives you a reason to treasure hunt, right? There is a motivating factor for your characters to exist. Everything costs thalers. Everything costs money. It is a civilization, so there are laws, and there is civilization. You actually reside in a civilized world with laws, despite the dark, gritty nature of it. There is a power structure in politics, and there is an economy. Going into the Davokar is about the only time you get away from civilization laws, right? It becomes man versus nature is a big theme of Symbaroum. Man versus nature. The game, big game conceit is adventures. They're comprised of a start, a middle, and an end. They assume you will use interlude scenes in combat. They assume you will provide challenges and rewards, and it is assumed that their encounters are balanced. They even have a great chart in here to make sure you don't overwhelm player characters with too difficult creatures, etc. What does this tell us? What can we infer from the games being more about adventures with a start, a middle, and an end? That you prepare something, that this is a prepared adventure for the night or for the week or whatever you're doing. Okay. Okay, next, let me come down here. I need to scroll this down. Hopefully it works. Yes. Combat. And combat is broken into 4 phases in turn sequence. The first phase is initiative. It's based on quickness. Phase 2 are actions like moving, attacking, using an item, using an ability, standing up, free actions, reactions, special actions. That's phase 2. You're going to move and attack, or you're going to drink a potion and move. You're going to stand up and defend yourself in a reaction. You're going to use a special thing like blind fighting in the dark, okay, or an ability. You might use in a special ability, okay. Phase 3 is defense. This is when the monsters, this is what happens when the monsters are going. You're going to defend yourself against attacks. You're going to defend yourself against opportunity attacks or flanking attacks, etc. And then the 4th phase of combat is damage. You're going to roll to do damage, and the monster has an automatic number for its defense and for its armor. And when you're attacked, you're going to roll your armor's ability to soak wounds. That's combat. Players roll everything. GM is free to administer the game, including the monsters, which have value modifiers, which are attributes with modifiers. They have actual tactics that you're going to want to read. It'll describe how the monster likes to do its thing in combat, or when it'll use its special abilities, etc. Monsters have monstrous traits that you need to pay attention to. They also have abilities that could be similar to the players or special, right? And all of their numbers are set values, so their damage is set. You do not roll damage for the creatures. It's automatically applied against the armor roll of the enemy, and their defense is an automatic adjustment to the attack of the player. Movement is abstract in scale and distance, so you're free to use zones, you're free to use grids and maps, or you're free to describe that you just move into melee or that you attempt to run across the room or whatever. So it's very, very, very simple to use movement in any kind of gaming you like. And then artifacts are magic items, and artifacts are one of the big things you're looking for in the game. They're some of the things you want to find, and of course corruption is tied directly to artifacts. And that, for the most part, is Symbaroum. That is in a nutshell. Now the book itself is fantastic because they give you the races and all which matter. They give you these archetypes, which are basically 3, but then they give you sub archetypes of what things in this archetype might look like. But these are guides. You don't have to make a wizard or a self-taught mystic. You can kind of mix and match to create your own. But there are guides for every one of these, like 8 of these things, 9 of these things. Okay? And then, of course, it walks you through character gen, how the game works, your attributes. There are 8 attributes, a success test and what that requires and how it works. And then the value modifiers that I was talking about. There is a value for all attributes. Max is at 15, right? And then the modifier. Remember, positives mean something is really easy. Negatives mean something is really hard. So again, if I say to somebody, this is a -5 strength test, they know it's the most difficult possible strength test they're going to take in today's game. Now, this can be different based on monsters. Monsters can have all kinds of numbers with modifiers. For instance, the snake was a 16 -6. But for the most part, the game is going to stay within this realm of 5 to 15, and it's going to use +5 to -5 in the scale. And this is these handy little things are all over the book, which is fantastic. Races again, and then so we get 2 abilities. They list every ability in a chart, and then they list what archetypes best fit this ability. All right, to keep you on track if you're looking to make a rogue type character, a wizard type character, or a warrior type character. And they give all these great little charts in this Symbaroum Core book. Let's see here. They walk you through, and they have nice little information over here. And then again, we have our powers. These are the spells, and then roughly what school you would find this spell in, either religious, wizardry, witchcraft, right? And then again, they all have novice, adept, and master abilities. And they tell you whether they're active abilities or free abilities or passive abilities. Let's see what else. Equipment is really good. Armor is generally rated light, medium, heavy, and it has a protection, which is which is a soak, damage soak. It'll have its impending ability upon your quickness, how it affects your quickness score. So remember, it's not complicated. We have a weight of armor. We have what it soaks, right? So you don't have to pick an armor from here. You can just say, I'm wearing light armor. It counts as 1d4. Its impediment is 2, and it costs me 2 thaler. And you can name the equipment. It's leather armor. So you don't have to pick one of these. It has a category, which I love. And then, of course, the impediment only affects quickness and quickness-related abilities. So again, pretty simple. It may look complicated, but it's that simple, right? Okay, weapons all have qualities. Armor has qualities, so you need to read that quality. Flexibility, for instance, means flexible armor means your impediment's actually only a 1. So it wouldn't be a 2, it would be a 1 if it's flexible armor. So you want to read the fine print of what does flexible actually mean. Okay. And weapons, again, have qualities. They're listed as heavy, long, projectile, etc. And then they have specialized weapons underneath that, the damage they do, and then any quality that you want to pay attention to in the written descriptions, and then what it costs you. Right? So something like precise gives you a +1 attack to all attacks. So a precise weapon gives you a +1 to hit with it. And that's nice to know if you want to use precise weapons, what that means. Okay. Again, everything has money, everything costs money, and it's assumed you will be spending money to stay at inns, to rent a room, to eat, to do things. So again, part of the motivation of the game is to have enough money to function when you're not in the field. So much so you have to buy an explorer's license and pay the fines, etc., when you're exploring. So Unlike D&D or traditional games where you get experience points based on treasure and killing, in this you need money to function in the world, so a GM should be charging the players for everything they do. This makes going out in the field relevant to why you would be bothering to do this if you're going to exist in this world as a character with a personal goal. Okay. Uh, Again, we don't assume just because this stuff's listed, but we ignore it, which I think most gamers do. There's these tables of stuff in these game books that, and I think many people just ignore them. And so yeah, you need rope, and that rope's going to cost you something. Yes, you're going to stop at the inn and have a meal. It's going to cost you something, right? Okay. And then we get the player rules, how the game works, how to operate in combat, what your options are, what you can do. It's got this great table. The combat, all the combat rules are right here. Everything you need to know for combat is right here. It's a brilliant book. And then we get to the game master's portion of the book. For those who need help in how the game works or how to be a good game master, this includes optional rules. And then we get to the game master's rules, what the game master needs to know and things that to operate. And then campaign rules like areas, what areas would have what kind of creatures in them to keep you straight there. And then, of course, how to adventure, how money works, how writs of debt work, how bribes work. Because again, you're going to be dealing in a world where there's criminals, but there's laws, which means you can be a criminal. You can be dealing with criminals. So there's lots of stuff you can utilize and play to keep the characters in the suspension of disbelief is what we would call it. Settlements and equipment, again, and it breaks all this stuff down. And then, of course, we get to adventures, and it describes how an adventure should be set up. So, again, this is where I talk about the core book, implying that you will do a thing on a given evening, which will lead to another thing, which will lead to a chronicle or a campaign. And it gives good ideas for all those things, how those things work. And then, of course, your monster section, another great table to remind you of the types of monsters, what they're about, some of their abilities, but also whether they're challenging, mighty, or weak. And it helps keep you from overwhelming the party, right? Try to balance out those things, which again implies that you're preparing an adventure for the players. And that's why I make my argument that this is about preparation, all right? And then it has a adventure, the Promised Land adventure, to get your characters in the world and going. So I could have done the icebreaker with the Promised Land, but looking over the Promised Land, I realized it might be too long for the first start, and I didn't want to have to come back and finish the Promised Land. So I wrote something I thought we could finish in an evening. Fortunately, we were able to finish it. It took me longer than I thought, but we did finish. And that is a comprehensive review of Free League's Symbaroum Core Rulebook. Thank you for watching. Everybody out there, have a great week. Goodbye.